Hello, my fellow schizotypals. Karhlyle Fletcher here with the news. What are we going into today? Well, prenatal caffeine exposure. So pregnancy and caffeine, that's a little not doing the best. Otherwise, we got stuff going on with fiber hemp. We got stuff going on with the summary of cannabis legalization in Canada. We've got the FDA choosing to work with certain companies, maybe, and also working against other ones. We've got DTE fucking up in trying to give Detroit money to pay us off and make us like them. And then we've got $20 million from cannabis revenue going towards research on PTSD and mental health in Michigan, which is amazing, and that's really good news. And then we're going to end off with Mother by Gorky, which is I think a 1907 piece of socialist literature. And then I Am Sleepless's Paper Bird. Yeah. So research, Russia, Florida. That's what we're doing. And that's today's show. Anyways, look at this. Whoa. Production budget, right? Wow. We're professional. Amazing. Anyways, I'm not even on the right page, so I didn't do that as smooth as I could. But, prenatal caffeine exposure, association with neurodevelopmental outcomes in 9 to 11-year-old children. Despite the widespread use of caffeine, including consumption during pregnancy, the effects of prenatal caffeine exposure on child brain development and behavior is unclear. To address this, we use data from the Adolescent Brain and Cognitive Development Study in 11,875 children aged 9 to 11 years from 22 sites across the United States. We explored the association between prenatal caffeine exposure and various developmental outcomes, including birth outcomes, physical health, behavioral problems, cognition, substance abuse, and brain structure in children, and evaluated dose effects. Among 9,978 children who had valid data for prenatal caffeine exposure and whose mothers did not use drugs of abuse after knowing of pregnancy, had no prenatal caffeine exposure, had daily, we're doing numbers of that. Prenatal caffeine exposure, including the widely recommended safe dose, was associated with a greater externalizing problems, whereas greater BMI and soda consumption were only observed in children with high dose exposures 3+ times per day. Notably, the effect size for the association of externalizing problems with prenatal caffeine exposure was comparable with that reported for prenatal alcohol and prenatal cannabis exposures from previous ABCD publications. Additionally, prenatal caffeine exposure was associated with brain structural changes that included greater posterior and lower frontal cortical thickness and altered parieto-optical sulcal depth. The recommended safe dose of caffeine during pregnancy should be carefully studied to assess whether the behavioral and brain correlates observed here are clinically relevant and determine whether it needs adjustment. Because of the high prevalence of caffeine use in the general population, studies on prenatal exposure to drugs of abuse should include prenatal caffeine use as a covariate. Important stuff, because, I think that none of us are safe. Pills, very common. Alcohol, very common. Smoking weed, very common. I think that, I don't have a study in front of me, but if I recall correctly, there was a case where, fathers smoking cigarettes affects their children's offspring. So it's even male drug use. Your mom's substances use is going to affect you. Very interesting that it's caffeine, because which one of us doesn't drink pop or coffee or tea or something? Which one of us doesn't drink Monster? What? It's for me, I'm a black coffee guy. But for everybody, I think everybody's on caffeine. I don't think anybody's parents weren't on caffeine. And again, also what happens with the male? That's probably somewhat significant. And I just thought that was a very fascinating study, because that's again, who's not having this? And then I also, what it makes me think of as well, what it calls me back to, is in medieval history, how wine and beer was the only safe thing to drink. No, I am not ADD. It was the only safe thing to drink, so even children were drinking that. Obviously I think that those people were exposed to fetal alcohol syndrome, but maybe not in such a harsh way, because their drinks were weaker than ours, and maybe there is not an acceptable amount, but a realistic amount that will occur, and maybe the question is how do we cope with that, rather than being oh shit, don't do it. It's don't do it, correct, but under the situation, understanding that it might have already occurred, what do we do? Next thing, so presence of THC in fiber hemp. So I've covered this with Cannabis Tech before, Delta 8 THC, Delta 9 THC, the differences and all that, how you produce Delta 9. And the idea behind it is that, like, the reality behind it is that chemical engineering, and I will be covering this soon, chemical engineering is incredibly complex and incredibly difficult. Like, the issue is, like, one of the things that I think would be, I think an interesting idea is that nobody should be able to vote on anything that they don't have experience in, because, like, chemistry does not make sense to the lay person. There's going to be a delta 8, a delta 9, a delta 10, a delta 3, a delta, like, 25. Like, you can alter chemicals, and you can alter molecular structure very slightly to get a technical different substance that would be, like, not subject to the same regulation. So the reason why I bring that up is, like, already it's a very tricky concept to nail down, because they're like, you can't have this amount of THC in the product, and like, THC is the thing that is illegal. Cannabis itself as a product is not illegal. That's how you have hemp products. That's how you have people selling all that, CBD, etc., is that it's not THC. THC is the only illegal thing. So why is this important? Well, an isomer, the presence of delta 9 cis THC, plus minus 3 and minus 3 is present in cannabis fiber. So, like, the textile, the, like, working material, and, like, CBD, like, what you're getting that out of. It's not supposed to have any THC, but it has delta 9. And, like, we need regulatory, it's like, as they say, like, we need regulatory things to account for this, because we've had so many shipments of hemp that were legal under federal law that have been seized by the authorities and have been seized by the FDA. And then that product is just rotting, and the FDA does not pay reparations. They just literally steal product from a producer, claim that it's illegal, let it rot in front of them, ruin their business, and bleed them of money, and then face no repercussions for it. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is that if we're seeing testing for this, and if the government starts testing for it, like, it's like, you can, if they're going to use this form of THC as a reason to, like, we need to make sure you have every legal protection so that they cannot seize your shipment because of the presence of this, even though it is an isomer of THC. So that's the important thing that we've discovered here, is that it's present in textile and whatever, like, the more productive hemp. That was a big gulp. That was too much. Quick summary of the history of cannabis thus far. This was amazing. I love this story. So, 3 years later, obviously read his article, read it from the source, but I'm just going through, like, things, like, it's like, I'm not trying to give you everything of the article. I'm just trying to go through it with you and, like, just keep that attention span right there, right where we want it. And I'm also rolling, so, it's just, welcome to the disorder of high lit. It's amazing, isn't it? I love it. So 3 years later, much of the Canadian hype around cannabis had vanished, and now both industry and government are beginning a thorough postmortems of what is and isn't working with pot legalization. The lavish A-list parties, so common in the early days, were petering out even before COVID-19 arrived. Barely more than half of all pot sales today are conducted through the legal market, and that milestone was only recently achieved. Back in early 2019, Tweed, later renamed Canopy Growth Corporation, had a valuation north of $20 billion and active growing facilities in St. John's, Fredericton, Bowmanville, Edmonton, and Saskatchewan, as well as 2 in British Columbia's lower mainland. In the last year, all 7 have been closed or sold. At the original location in Smith Falls, layoffs are a regular occurrence. Since 2019, total reported net losses amount to more than $3.8 billion. Across the industry as a whole, total losses since 2015 are north of $10 billion. The most poignant sign of the failure of the cannabis business, however, might be sitting in warehouses across the country. At its peak last October, and, like, this is not even seized cannabis. So on top of the seized cannabis, or it's not even cannabis, like, on top of the seized hemp that has been rotting away in America. Meanwhile, in fucking Canada, 3 years later, the poignant sign of the failure of the cannabis business, however, might be sitting in warehouses across the country. At its peak last October, following the 2020 growing seasons, there was about 1.1 billion grams of harvested or processed cannabis held in storage. 95% of its inventory had not been purchased by retailers or wholesalers, and much of it is assumed to be largely unsaleable. whether because of degradation or excess supply. We have more pot in Canada than we can possibly sell. Producers today are sitting on a massive and predictable oversupply that is slowly becoming worthless, and that's going to cost a lot of companies a lot of money. Where's my ashtray? There's my ashtray. Cool. The industry woes can be traced back in part to its temporary lucrative early relationship with investment capital. After Justin Trudeau's Liberals took power in 2015, elected in part on the promise of pot, large producers, including Cannabis Growth and Aurora, sought out listings on a variety of Canadian stock exchanges. They were after retail investors, and producers hired third-party investor relation firms to promote their stocks as a once-in-a-generation chance to get in on the ground floor of not just a company, but of an entire industry. Strong retail investments soothed whatever lingering anxieties Bay Street might have had about the sector. The cannabis boom was an investment banker's dream, wrote Mark Rendell and Tim Calads in a 2019 Globe and Mail article. With so much retail investor demand, it was easy to underwrite share sales and to dictate the terms of the game. In the absence of any other metrics, like revenue or sales projections, investors learned how to judge a company by funding capacity, a rough measure of how much a cannabis given company could potentially grow on the land it possessed. The result was a production arms race. More investment meant new facilities, which meant more production, which meant more investment, which meant more money pushed into production. The cycle went on and on. Cannabis investors asked for a big scale of production when they should have asked for a good scale of sales, said John Fowler, the former CEO of the Supreme Cannabis Company, one of the producers that attracted a lot of buzz early on. Its price doubled over the back half of 2017, and its market cap peaked in early 2018, a year before legal pot actually went on sale. They shouldn't have talked about funding capacity, thrown money behind anyone who's going to build square footage. The logic governing the industry ahead of legalization tended to assume that any pot a company could grow would ultimately be sold. Licensed producers were accounting for their cannabis in ways that didn't make sense, valuing their inventory on their balance sheets similarly to stable commodities like vegetables, which have relatively consistent market prices and are more or less guaranteed to sell. That made the executives in the industry at that time many of the executives in the industry at that time had backgrounds in alcohol and commodities, where the price of a product and its path to market are more stable, likely played a role. Recently, cannabis had neither. Nobody was exactly sure of what the market price for retail pot would be, nor did anyone have a concrete idea of what consumers actually wanted. But pretending otherwise made the companies look great on paper. Valuation corresponded most with funding capacity, which is how you got a $20 billion company that hadn't sold a single gram to recreational buyers. Gross margin in the sector are distorted as a result, making firms look more profitable than they really are, wrote Joe Gastaldo in McLean's in early 2018, peeling back the layers of this accounting practice. Producers themselves often did little to dispel this idea. Fuller recalls companies keeping and storing fan leaves that contain low levels of psychoactive cannabinoids, at a higher value than they were to bolster their balance sheets. This was 5 years ago. Nobody was asking questions. All the company had to do is, we're hopeful we're going to find a way to make oil out of this, so let's keep it on the balance sheet. So, what we're seeing is this completely inflated market. Obviously, he's doing a great job explaining it, so I don't really feel like I needed to dumb it down at all. So it's but for investors who saw stock prices going gangbusters through 2017 and early 2018, the weed game was already profitable. The business model at that time did not demand actual weed sales, selling hype. Selling the potential of selling weed was proving lucrative. Stories of everyday Canadians getting rich on pot stocks fanned the flames even further. Investment was cast as a high-risk, huge-reward opportunity. Plus, it was providing massive amounts of capital to companies that needed to build highly specialized facilities to adhere to strict government regulation. With help from this investor enthusiasm, the industry expanded to 102 licensed producers by April 2018. The investment in facilities, massive hiring sprees, and fantastic marketing budgets all followed, undeterred by projections that it would be years before most producers turned any profit. There were steps along the way where decisions were made by big companies that made sense at the time, said Jay Rosenthal, a longtime industry analyst. Public markets were responding to funded capacity. The more capacity you had, the more people believed your stock was going to be real and therefore would invest in your stock. Fowler makes a similar point. It was advantageous for companies to keep that legend alive. When the market was still giving people credit for so many years of forward sales, nobody wanted to stick up their hand and be a wet blanket and say, hey, we don't think those sales are going to happen. And this is how you get industries that are too big. Because again, you have to build everything from the bottom up. You never start with the roof of a house. You always start with the foundation. And that's why, as he will describe, like the indigenous tribes and people who are able to locally produce cannabis, that are able to locally sell cannabis, as with everything, this is a self-contained market which can be expanded upon. You do not first expand a market and then develop it. You develop a market which you then expand. And that's what's so frustrating with the bottlenecks, because these bottlenecks are unnatural. This isn't capitalism, because capitalism is anybody can make the money. But here we have these LPs, and we have licenses, and we have like regulation, and we have like government funding, and we have like, you know, investment capital and all these things, which make for bottlenecks and make for these unnatural structures within the industry, which does not allow the industry to grow on its own merits. In the early days of legalization, product shortages, illustrated by news footages of lineups for stores with empty shelves, reinforced the idea that more production capacity was needed. Under pressure to quickly supply the legal market and to stop wasting bureaucratic time, Health Canada adjusted its approval process to require that companies have a facility in place before they could be licensed. The idea was to bump serious players with existing assets to the front of the line and stop approving for licenses for facilities that are still speculative. By late 2019, the market had flipped into oversupply, but even then, little was done to slow the pace of production. The capitalist logic of the market had pushed large producers to make ever more cannabis, to strive tirelessly to outproduce the competition, to drive down production cost, and to flood the market with more and more pot products whether people wanted them or not. Legalization has always had critics from within the cannabis world. People who saw a lost opportunity to support more smaller, more sustainable producers as the bedrock of the cannabis industry. The know-how already existed in the many operations that had supplied under unregulated markets for generations. Rather than constructing a hybrid system that legitimized parts of the existing cannabis market, the federal government set up a highly regulated system over which Health Canada maintained significant control. The result was an industry that was politically palatable, but whose corporate character could feel alienating to some veterans of the cannabis world. By the time legalization took effect, Tim Barnhart had already been selling weed commercially for a few years, beyond the reach of the Canadian government, out of his legacy 420 store on Mohawk territory east of Toronto. He had watched the way cannabis legalization had played out from an indigenous vantage, seeing corporations claim to be pioneering what he was already doing pretty sustainably for his own people. And yet, cannabis producers are throwing away more products than ever before. Since 2018, nearly 450 million grams of unpackaged cannabis has been destroyed, according to reporting from MJ Biz Daily. Nearly 280 million grams of that was from 2020 alone, representing almost a fifth, 20% of all production that year. An expected loss in the commercial growing is between 5 and 8%. Add to that, so that's double. Nearly 3.8 million finished packages of dried flower, 1.5 million packages of extracts, and more than 700,000 packaged edibles. Maybe this is a feature of capitalism. We are throwing out food while people go hungry. We have empty houses and people are homeless. So to see that replicated in the cannabis space is unfortunate, but perhaps unsurprising. The question is not whether there is money to be made in cannabis. Almost all experts agree that the pot business is viable in the long run. Invest now when it's down. But why? I'm not a financial advisor. Don't listen to me. That was a joke. But why the industry's most well-funded producers have been so consistently unable to turn a profit on something once talked about as a license to print money. Canadians spent roughly $2.6 billion on legal cannabis in 2020, a healthy amount, but far short of the $6.5 billion that CIBC projected in 2018. Even in a year that saw legal cannabis finally comprise more than half the market, the biggest companies are still in the red. Aurora reported more than $3 billion losses for 2020. Cannabis gross losses totaled $1.3 billion. Tilray lost $271 million. As Dan Sutton, CEO of the boutique producer Tantalus Labs, put in an interview with BIV, today there are no consistently profitable cannabis cultivators, big or small, in Canada. Zero. While the financial losses keep piling up, the industry is beginning to change. After a sluggish rollout, more micro-cultivators are gaining licenses for smaller craft operations. A smaller scale of production could be a more sustainable business model, but even these seem ill-fitting within a heavily regulated cannabis economy. Forced, in most cases, to sell to a provincial wholesaler along with everybody else in the sector, craft producers can struggle to gain trajectories when they come up against the marketing developments of their Auroras and the Canopies. The business model that underwrote the early days of legalization has yet to stabilize, and a long-expected phase of difficult bankruptcies, mergers, and consolidation, meaning mass layoffs and abandoned grow facilities, is here. A drive through these Canadian places, including Kettle Point, on the other hand, offers a window into another way forward, a sovereign, self-regulating, indigenous cannabis trade. Shops along the road are located just a few kilometers away from the field where the cannabis is grown. The quality is often quite good. Some of the shops are supported by Legacy 420's nation-to-nation wholesale and quality testing services. If nothing else, these operations demonstrate that safe cannabis sales aren't the exclusive dominion of highly regulated shareholder capitalism, that safely growing and selling pot need not require a degree in capital finance. And I think that's very important, because that's like the thing is that it's like, so I'm very pro cannabis as pharmaceuticals, and I'm very pro cannabis pharmaceuticals because I think that's the only way to win over the old folks. But young people, yeah, please let us just support farmers. Done the right way, it can be a lucrative industry, but Canada didn't get it right. So now they have a costly product, a surplus that's all dried out, lower the fucking price, and I don't know what they're going to do. How do we have so much? So, okay, if the average Canadian, from this article in another place, I think it was 34%, they pay 34% more than the average street buyer. So why, if you have all of this, if you have millions of dollars worth of cannabis that's just rotting, why don't you lower your price? Isn't that how capitalism works? Supply and demand? If you have an oversupply, doesn't that mean that the price goes, woo, and then you just get like free weed? Or am I wrong? Am I just, like... Nah, God damn it. Sorry, that's just, I just got frustrated. Let me just... There's going to be a huge corporate write-down again, and I'm not sure that's going to leave a lot of these players. The days of big corporate cannabis companies dominating the market may be on the wane, and 1 billion grams of weed they can't sell could only accelerate that process. And as Fowler says, turbulence at the major producers seems unavoidable for the foreseeable future. It could take 2 years to work through, it could take 10. Unfortunately, the exuberance of the early days of our cannabis industry will live under that shadow for a long time. And here, Charlotte's Web got rejected. And so, like, to me, that kind of looks like they just don't want to regulate CBD. Because it's like they're working with Pure Green and MAPS. And I think they're working with them because they know that they have pharmaceutical quality controlled products. Meanwhile, CBD as a dietary supplement is much harder to regulate. If you regulate one, you should probably have to regulate all of them. And I just don't think the FDA wants to do that. DTE is like, yeah, so the Michigan Attorney General is like, yeah, DTE should pay the people who live here, who have been failed by the power grid and like who have had no power for like, extensive times, and like how their food went wrong, like how their food rotted. So like you should give them money to get more food. And I'm just saying like, oh wow, it would suck so much to just pay for underground lines. It's just so expensive, such an expensive policy. Meanwhile, we're like, we might have to pay people considering that we can't even give them power because of how shitty our infrastructure is. And it's like, I understand it's a short-term investment, but the long-term payoff is worth it. Anyways, final piece of news. So again, this is covered by Ben Adlin. And so $13 million of cannabis revenue goes to MAPS for purportedly the first clinical trial of inhaled botanical marijuana for post-traumatic stress disorder, and $7 million to Wayne State University to research cannabis for mental health. And so I got 2 points from this, or 2 moments. Veterans have been a potent force in the decades-long movement to end America's war on drugs, playing key roles in uniting disparate political groups to turn the tide on cannabis prohibition, and increasingly to explore the therapeutic potential of other controlled substances, including MDMA and psychedelics. But as with much of the medical marijuana movement, support among veterans for the most part did not result from clinical studies, which were virtually impossible under widespread prohibition. Instead, it came from individuals and word-of-mouth experience among veterans and their communities. Funded by Michigan's $20 million Veteran Marijuana Research Grant Program, which was established by 2018 in the state's legalization law. The new study is aimed at determining how effective smoked cannabis actually is at treating PTSD and its symptoms. If it's demonstrated to work well, that could lead to phase 3 trials and ultimately raw cannabis, so cannabis as medicine being developed in Michigan, or at least, and sold as a pharmaceutical. eventually a joint, or at least one approved by the U.S. Food and by the FDA, could be covered by veterans insurance, just like in the Czech Republic, just like I think in Ireland, you know? In Israel and Canada, veterans are able to use a certain amount of cannabis per day and have it reimbursed through their veteran health service programs. Like, Jesus. Like, that's this is incredible. If it's there, and I do believe, like, why would people be smoking cannabis for PTSD for decades if it wasn't effective? You know, like, ultimately, again, not all pills work for everybody. Peanuts kill some people. Not all diets are the same. But I think that for at least a minority, cannabis is helpful. Specifically with PTSD, specifically because it increases neuroplasticity. That's the theory that I understand best. And that's what I would posit. Again, not a medical professional, more of like a medical fanboy. We still have more regulatory negotiations ahead of us in order to convince the FDA to let us use the kind of cannabis that veterans are already using in the United States. She explained that because of difficulty sourcing high-quality cannabis from the few government-approved growers in the U.S., the team is planning to bring in cannabis for phase 2 trials from a regulated grower overseas. So we're losing money. Even though Ann Arbor has some of the fucking best cannabis in the world that I can buy as an adult, they're like, oh, no, it's not regulated well. Motherfucker, we can break down this stuff on a molecular level, and you're telling me that you can't test it and regulate it well enough? Fuck my life. God damn it. So the team is selecting appropriately qualified growers from abroad that have already validated their production of elements at the level of good manufacturing practices. Fine. If the trials are successful, however, MAPS could ultimately develop a cannabis pharmaceutical product through its public benefit corporation. Michiganders are granting nonprofit researchers with the opportunity to establish whether cannabis is helpful for veterans of PTSD. If so, we will seek to return that generosity by developing a public benefit cannabis pharmaceutical product that would be eligible for insurance coverage just like any other pharmaceutical drug. This is big news. This is how we shift into the mainstream, because again, we don't want... I'm not a big recreational advocate. I want recreational laws so you don't go to jail. Big things for me. Pharmaceutical acceptance so that people can get it through insurance. I think that the next big spearhead, obviously psychedelics, but that's a separate conversation, is getting people out of prison. Code for America does it fucking well, but anybody who was in for a cannabis charge should be immediately pardoned, let out, with their records wiped. We should really be pushing for that. I don't understand how anybody votes for a Democrat who's not behind that. I don't understand what it is to be that party without policy like that. Because what does it mean to be liberal if you're not trying to get people out of prison? That's another thing too, where people are talking about, you know, they're so quick to criticize like all of these genocidal fucking countries, and it's like, well, what is our prison system? Is that not a slow genocide, where you just lock away people for the rest of their natural lives because why, they didn't pay their taxes? You know, seems more humane to just kill somebody because they disagree with you. What would we do with Snowden? You think Snowden would get out? Just interesting. Food for thought. Anyways, MAPS previously organized what it said was the only FDA-regulated controlled study of cannabis for PTSD, which was funded with $2.2 million of Colorado's Department of Public Health and Environment. All treatment groups showed good tolerability and improvement in PTSD symptoms after 3 weeks. A MAPS press release says, this study further informed the development of the second larger trial, identifying that higher quality cannabis must be used to differentiate between the response of the control group and the placebo group. I don't give a fuck about the research that you're talking about that uses cannabis from Mississippi. I don't care. It's not real. It's not what people smoke. I don't smoke it. You don't smoke it. Nobody fucking smokes it. Don't study it. Don't research it. It is not a market product. The market is the only thing that matters because it's what people fucking use. And that includes pharmaceuticals. That includes medicine. Jesus, fuck. The Wayne State University project, meanwhile, will explore the biochemical mechanisms through which cannabis could be employed to treat PTSD, anxiety, sleep disorders, depression, and suicidality, according to the research team's proposal. And you know I will be covering all of that shit. I will be covering all that shit. If I could get somebody from the WSU team in on the podcast, that would be amazing, because this shit is so important, I believe. I believe that we might see the shift in cannabis pharmaceuticals. It seems like Joe Biden and this administration is not exactly as sympathetic as people might have been led to believe. But still, we might have a great chance at normalizing and legalizing cannabis pharmaceuticals within, I would say, almost the year, especially the decade, but within the year. Not this year, like within the end of 2022. Wow, that was a fuck up. But yeah, the end of 2022. So we're done with the news. We're gonna go into Mother now. So this is the next segment of the show. I'm gonna do a shout out now. I'm gonna do a shout out at the end. So if you like the show, thank you so much. I am highly flattered, and I think that you're a great person, and I think you're really cute, and I think that we should be best friends. Anyways, this is our Patreon. This is the highlight Patreon. I got old classic articles up there. Posted the podcast up there. Got exclusive lit up there. So like this is a comedy I'm working on, which is based off Aristophanes' The Frogs. So that's what this is. This is Highlight with Karhlyle Fletcher. That's our Patreon. That's the official way to support the show. Otherwise, if you'd like more content and you would like shorter content, make sure to check out us on TikTok. And it is a different tone. It's way faster paced, obviously. But you can see us here. So just please tune into the show. Check it out. And yeah, we got 6 videos up, and we're going to be doing more later. You know, got 3 shot. We'll upload them soon. Otherwise, check out highlight clips. And I guess that's all I have to say. That's all I have to shill. But yeah, please like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on TikTok and interact. And, you know, please support the Patreon. And that's all I really can ask for. Thank you so much for being an audience. What do we want to talk about from Mother? So, obviously, one of the things that I'm really interested in is the dissolution of identity. We who work our whole lives long, it unites us gradually and more every day. The time will come where we shall all be united. What is dear to us is not our penny, because it is no rounder than other penny. It's only heavier. There's more human blood in it. There's more human blood in it than the manager's ruble. Always and everywhere we are first in work but last in life. Who cares for us? Who wishes us good? Who thinks us human being? No one. We will not attain to a better life until we feel ourselves as comrades, as one family of friends firmly bound together by one desire, the desire to fight for our rights. So, the reason why this is really important to me, and I understand that it's like, oh my god, like this is like, you know, not the idea that you want, or let's see, where the fuck is it? Really should have had this out, you know. But welcome to High Lit. It happens, you know. It occurs. Well, this is just good. Yes, it hurts him, but you must distrust man. You must fear him and even hate him. Man is divided. He is cut in two by life. You'd like to only to love him. But how is it possible? How can you forgive a man if he goes against you like a wild beast, does not recognize that there is a living soul in you, and kicks your face, a human face? You must not forgive. It's not for yourself that you mustn't. I'd stand all the insults as far as I myself am concerned, but I don't want to show indulgence for insults. I don't want to let them learn on my back how to beat others. This is something that I've told people so repeatedly, is that like you cannot abide. Like if you allow yourself to be abused, you're training an abuser to be better at it. So that is, you know, something that you know, it's just funny that it's like in a socialist novel from 100 years ago. But I must not forgive anything in the world that is evil, even though it does not hurt. I'm not alone in the world. If I allow myself to be insulted today, maybe I can afford to laugh at the insult. Maybe it doesn't sting me, but having tested his strength on me, the offender will flay someone else the next day. And I don't really give a fuck about myself or fighting for myself, but there is something about like standing up to evil, because if you don't, then evil gets better at being evil. Long live free speech. It's funny. But yeah, this is from Russia. This is like a little bit before the revolution, I think. So all your comrades, you know, for all, mother dear, for all, the world is ours. The world is for the workers. For us there is no nation, no race. For us there are only comrades and foes. All the working men are our comrades. All the rich, all the authorities are our foes. The police will love us because they love thieves. And I mean, like, that's the thing, is that it's like, not to get into conspiracy theory, but we can flirt with it a little bit, right? So the idea is that, you know, the CIA really promoted like racial conflict and like the idea of the race struggle in the last century because of the rise of the USSR and the rise of communism, because this is the class study, you know, where it's like, I'm trying to find a part that literally like calls against, where it's like comrades. There are they say comrades. They say there are various races on the earth, Jews and Germans, English and Tartars, but I don't believe it. There are only two nations, two irreconcilable tribes, the rich and the poor. People dress differently and speak differently, but look at the rich Frenchman and the rich German, or the rich Englishman, and you'll see that they are all Tartars in the way that they treat their working man, a plague on them. On the other hand, we can see that the French working men, the Tartar working men, the Turkish working men, all live the same dog's life as we the Russian working men. So, to me, it's like, I'm sympathetic to Russians. I'm sympathetic to the USSR. I stand pretty, I have a pretty Camuvian alignment with it, where I'm sympathetic to the ideas, but I hate camps. I just don't believe in camps. But before Lenin, before Stalin, you know, talking and discussing about how it's like the dissolution of identity. It does not matter that I might be different than you. I do not unite to you because you're a man and I'm a man and that is our brotherhood. It's like, no, it doesn't matter if you're a man and I'm a man. It doesn't matter if you're like old and I'm young. It doesn't matter if, you know, you work in the farm and I work in, you know, a factory. It doesn't matter gender. It doesn't matter identity. Like, it doesn't matter your sexuality. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter your belief. All are one humanity. You know? So, like, when we're working for human rights, we're working for human rights. And, like, that has to do... It goes far beyond servicing a community. Because, like, once you benefit... If you're working to benefit all humanity, all communities benefit. So it's like you necessarily will take care of those who are disadvantaged, regardless of how they look. And, like, that's what the ideology means to me. I think that is a very important thing, that because books like this, because Russian and communist literature was banned from America, I think that was a major weak spot in our ideology. Is that we don't know how to, you know, it's like I feel like the CIA did push us towards more and more splitting apart, because I do, you know, it's like that meme where it's like the worst thing for them is for us to unite. So I think that's literally what they did, is they took away this literature. But yeah. And I was excited to share that part. Yeah. So even money has no value for you. People do anything to get money. They kill their souls for it. But for you, money is so many pieces of little paper, little bits of copper. You seem to keep it by you just out of kindness to people. It's an awfully bothersome article, money is. Both to give it and to take it is embarrassing. Christ would not have been effective either if men had not perished for his sake. They do not live, they rot in dire, inescapable want. And all around them the government authorities watch like ravens to see if a crumb is not left over. And if they do find a crumb, they snatch that away too and give you a punch in the face besides. And I mean, and this is the issue, is that then, like, it's like they knew. Like, this is the thing, is that when you break that barrier of World War One and you study history before World War One, you have different camps. So, like, you have the socialist, where you have, like, the moral socialist, who's about the eternal brotherhood of man. And then you have the other one, who's, like, he also believes in this ideal. But, yeah, I'm hungry. I'm sorry. It's just, oh, no. But, you know, it's like this guy also believes in this ideal, but what he says, due to the starvation and the mismanagement and all that is that let death make amends for death. That is to die so that the people should arise to life again. And let thousands die in order that hosts of people over the earth may rise to life again. That's it. It's easy to die, but let the people rise to life again. That's a different thing. Let them rise up in the rebellion. The peasant stands more firmly on his feet. He feels the ground underneath him, although he does not possess it. Yet he feels the earth. But the factory working man is something like a bird. He has no home. Today he's here, tomorrow there. But the peasant wants to improve himself just where he is without moving off the spot. Yeah, you must destroy those who hinder the progress of life, who sell human beings for money in order to buy quiet or esteem for themselves. If a Judas stands in the way of the honest people, lying in wait to betray them, I should be a Judas myself if I did not destroy him. And that is the issue when you have, that's the real socialist split. Where you have, communism, and it's so what's the issue with it? Is that, I do think that there is something inevitable about the ideas of it. Where I think that there is this simple, it's so strange that there's these people who are distinctly critical of communism. And then they talk about taking care of your community, treating people fairly, being kind, and being these things. And it's well, that is what communism is about. It's not about the abolition of the dollar. It's not about the abolition of the dollar tomorrow. It's about living your life in service, essentially. And that's where it's I compare it to soberness, where that's an orthodox idea. I think it is essentially all socialists all communists are people who are trying to create the kingdom of heaven on earth. That's it. They're just trying to raise children. They're just trying to make sure that people have fulfilling lives. They're just trying to make sure that people don't feel like they've been taken advantage of and abused and wrung out their entire lives. So it's I think that is an inherent conversation within the ideology that doesn't get enough exposure, probably because people don't read, but that is a natural internal conflict within what you might be able to call the Bolsheviks. But I know that their blood, the blood of the enemy, can bring no results. I know that their blood is barren, fruitless. Truth grows well only on the soil irrigated with the copious rain of our own blood. And their putrid blood goes to waste without a trace left. I know it. And so that's his point, is to say murder is pointless. You can kill as many archdukes as you want. But, again, if you look at Camus' Les Jetés, I think it's Les Jetés? Yeah. The Just Assassins. That is, it's about, you read it, it's the same sort of, just, you'll get it. If you've read it, yeah. This guy also said, for myself, I wouldn't touch a living thing, but for the comrades, for the cause, I'm capable of everything. I'd even kill. I'd kill my own son. And it's okay, Stalin. All hearts, so all human hearts, because of how we live, are smitten in the conflict of interest. All are consumed with a blind greed, eaten up with envy, stricken, wounded, and dripping with filth, falsehood, and cowardice. All people are sick. They are afraid to live. They wander about as in a mist. Everyone feels only his own toothache. But lo and behold, here is a man coming and illuminating his life with the light of reason, and he shouts, "Oho, you straying roaches! It's time, high time for you to understand that all your interests are one, that everyone has the need to live, and everyone has the desire to grow. Love is the mother of life, not hate. My brothers, I hear this message sounding through the world." And this is it's so, I'm sorry, but it's so similar to the gospel. It's so similar going to the Pharisee and just being I don't care about power. I don't care about the structure of society. I want to see human life flourish. I want to see us celebrate the good. And that's, yeah. Another one. I have no interest in migrating from the earth even to the nearest planet before we have publicly and openly renounced the old order of things, and I am therefore absolutely opposed to the comrades' motion for an armed demonstration. So he's literally I wouldn't go I wouldn't go to Mars. You see, if you keep adding copper bits by bit to a child's food, you prevent the growth of its bone, and he'll be a dwarf. But if from his youth you poison up a man with gold, you'll deaden his soul, and he'll be a dwarf of soul. So yeah, I mean, it's like there is this idea of like, you know, it's like you want to fight for the common man. You want to feel that brotherhood. You want to be somebody who's like, I'm humanist first. I'm social policy first. I'm like trying to take care of the dispossessed and the people who are left out of society. But at the same time, you then have to understand who you're giving power to. Because, I mean, like, I am very sympathetic to the USSR, but I'm absolutely anti the rape of the Romanovs. You know, like, I think that is inhumane and that is unnecessary. Because, again, it's like, the criticism is like, it's like, if everybody agrees to communism, then we can have it. And it's like, well, that's ridiculous. It's like, well, I mean, it's Christianity. You know, if everybody was Christian, we'd have a perfect world or whatever. Isn't that the idea? Same thing with communism. It's just like that sort of thing. But the foundations of communism are like, can we, you know, improve the quality of life, things like that? Can we, you know, get people more... It's hard to explain because, I mean, there's obviously conflicting reports and there's different worldviews on it. But I think that it speaks for itself on some regard that the majority of Russians think that the USSR was the high point of the country. Anyways, let's let I Am Sleepless pay us off. Let's let them play us off, yeah? Oh, I have all my tabs here. God fucking damn it. Is that fine? I think it's fine. Anyways, I Am Sleepless, great friend of mine. Listen to his music, it's good. I'm gonna get out of your hair. I'll be back in a minute.
this empty sea, with hopes and dreams of who I'll be. And as the waves crash over me, I gasp for air 'cause I can't breathe. Oh, in shallow seas I'll stay, I'll stay, and hopelessly drift away, away. I don a mask of apathy. It's fastened with my broken dreams. I cry out with sincerity. These hollow words are akin to me. Oh, in shallow seas I'll stay, I'll stay, and hopelessly drift away, away.
been listening to I Am Sleepless. Dylan Bailey. It's his band. It's his music. I just want to check a fact real quick. So this came out in 2014, so I was 18. I've been listening to this for 7 years now. And I am not subscribed to him on this channel, but I will. I am sleepy. Love you, Dylan. Always love you, dude. So please support him and check out what he's got going on. That's really all I had to say. Thank you so much for watching Highlit. Again, please support us on Patreon and TikTok if you enjoy the show. Check me out on Twitter, KF Cannabis. Yeah, stay informed. Please like, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Just hang out. Check it again. We're back tomorrow, and we're back Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been episode 45. I'm Karhlyle Fletcher, and have a great rest of your day.